After 2 weeks away, we are so happy to be back with another edition of Broncos Beat. Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Alexis Perry, joined today by none other than Benjamin Allbright from Broncos Country Tonight on KOA Radio, James Palmer from the NFL Network, and Cecil Lammey from 104.3 The Fan. Guys, there is a lot to catch up on, but first, we have to start with the biggest news that broke over the weekend as the Detroit Lions traded veteran quarterback Matthew Stafford to the LA Rams in exchange for 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Jared Goff. Sources say Denver's new GM, George Paton, was interested in Stafford, but to your knowledge, what was the extent of his interest?
Well, they were obviously interested enough to make an offer. Anytime a great quarterback comes free on the market, you'd be remiss as a general manager not to inquire and at least do due diligence on that. Broncos did make offers that they felt were competitive and comfortable, but they weren't obviously enough in the end to get it done. You had several ideas about a pick swap, moving 9, get the second back. You had player packages that Detroit wanted, trying to get Locke and Judy and stuff like that. And in the end, George Paton wasn't comfortable blowing up this young core that he signed on to be the general manager of in order to make that work. So the Broncos pulled out, fairly quickly on this and let these other teams bid it up.
What does this say about George Paton and his initial impressions of the Broncos' current quarterback situation?
Well, what it says is it needs to be better, honestly. And I like the fact that George Paton didn't go overboard and overpay and become desperate in this situation. George Paton did what he said he was going to do, as Benjamin highlights. Like, you're going to be involved in trade talks. You're going to be thorough. You're not going to overpay. You're not going to go overboard with things. And it came to a certain breaking point with George Paton where he's like, nah, we don't need to do that. And they don't need to trade for Matthew Stafford because the price got ridiculous. But what it says about the current quarterback situation is it must be better. The Broncos have to be better because in this division where you've got Pat Mahomes, best quarterback in the league, you've got Justin Herbert, rising star in the league, Derek Carr's no slouch either, you got the 4th best quarterback situation, and that's just in this division. Don't even get me started about this conference, which James, as we know, is going to quickly include Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars.
You're exactly right, Cecil. And then look at the division and go back to it. If you think getting Matthew Stafford, who I believe is one of the best quarterbacks in football, top 10 guy, in my opinion, you could have him. Again, the contract's probably 2 years, but he's probably got 4 good years of football in him. If you thought getting him and giving up a lot to get him would make you compete with the Chiefs, you would go and do it. So what this shows me is other parts of the roster he doesn't want to be able to not build towards. I think when you start looking at the picks that the Rams had to give up and what George Paton is looking at going, we have a lot of other holes on this roster. To me, I'll flip it and say, kind of been like, this looks at the rest of the roster, not just the quarterback spot as well, by going, if I immediately upgrade that, and let's just be honest, it's a very big upgrade to go from Matthew Stafford to Drew Lock. And I do think if you wanted to do that, you had to be comfortable with the rest of the roster. There's other places he wants to make some moves, so you don't give up too much because you think you're thin in other spots.
In the end, it's a cost-benefit analysis. You're moving from the 4th best quarterback in the division to what? Maybe 3rd if you get Matt Stafford at that point. I mean, is he better than Derek Carr? Sometimes. Let's be honest.
He is better than Justin Herbert.
I don't know. Herbert might be getting there pretty quick. I believe in Justin Herbert. I'll say that. I was wrong on him in the beginning. But in the end, you've got a defensive rebuild coming, and George Paton knows that. You look across the side of the ball, the young offense is set, but you got a defensive rebuild coming. You can't blow that up. You can't blow up your chance to be able to draft the guys that you need to fill that, to get a guy who's if James is running things, 2nd best quarterback in the division, in my opinion, 3rd.
Yep.
All right, guys, there's no reason to believe that the Stafford trade is a precursor to what we could see if the Texans agree to Deshaun Watson's trade request. The Stafford deal will look like small potatoes in comparison. So why is Watson's market value so much greater than a guy like Stafford's when in reality, both guys can really help any team win now?
You have a guy that's entering his prime. Yeah, and he's incredible. And James will go on and on about him because we all can go on and on about Deshaun Watson. When he came out of college, I had him as the #1 quarterback that year. Yes, above Pat Mahomes. And, of course, Mitchell Trubisky wasn't anywhere near the first round, but I digress. Deshaun Watson is special. Our dear friend Daniel Jeremiah always says that you've got trucks and you've got trailers when it comes to the quarterback position. Those trucks will carry you. They'll pull the team along with them. The trailers need a bunch of stuff around them in order to be good. Well, Deshaun Watson is certainly one of those trucks because he can carry a franchise, and he's just entering his prime, and he is a special, special quarterback.
25 years old. Look what he put up this season. Maybe the best season anybody has had on such a poor team that won 4 games. If you go and look at what he did leading the league in passing, talking to coaches down there, they just said the way he played with not any talent really around him at the skill positions by the end of the season was remarkable. Now, my good buddy John McClain, a mentor to me when I was in Houston, said it's going to take 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, and 2 defensive starters on your team. I think the line would be a mile long if that is what the offer is going to be for Deshaun Watson. It's going to be much, much more than that. This is a player that would revolutionize your franchise, that can win with almost anybody, as Cecil kind of said. This type of talent doesn't come along very often. And if there wasn't a Patrick Mahomes in that draft, we would be raving even more about Deshaun Watson than we are right now if he wasn't in the same draft as the guy we're all looking to maybe be the next Tom Brady in terms of success.
Yeah, you hit all the high points there. He's 25 years old. He's got the bulk of his contract ahead of him, the bulk of his career ahead of him. He's succeeded on bad football teams with bad offensive lines and no skill. He carries people, as Cecil pointed out, and that's really what it is in the end. I know you said 2 2s, 2 1s, and 2 players. When I talked to somebody about this before this thing started going south, they said that'll get you to the table, but they expect 3 1s, a pair of 2s,
Easy.
and probably two starter to Pro Bowl caliber players.
Well, as we're talking about what it's going to take to possibly land Deshaun Watson, you guys, Paton said that he will be aggressive but not reckless while building this team. But to land Deshaun Watson, you got to be a little bit reckless. So if you were in George Paton's shoes, what would you give up for Deshaun Watson?
Blank check. I mean, honestly, he's that type of player. Again, Matthew Stafford is one thing, and we can debate, where he's at. But Deshaun Watson is something completely different. You contend right away with Deshaun Watson. So if it takes 3 firsts, I'm fine with 3 firsts, because if you're competing, just like look what the Rams gave the Lions. If they're competing with Matthew Stafford, their first rounders are going to be in the 20s, 25, 28, 30, whatever the number is. Yeah, sure. Give him some late first round picks. If you get Deshaun Watson, you are making the playoffs. You are making that sort of run. And all of a sudden your first rounders aren't top 10 picks. They're bottom 10 picks in the first round.
I know the way they built things around Deshaun Watson this past year, it was to make him the point guard, make him Tom Brady, which Bill O'Brien spent time with as the offensive coordinator in New England. It was, let's try to have a bunch of B type of talent around him, and he can get the football wherever it needs to go. And he did that, and he was amazing. They did have one of the worst defenses I've seen in a long time, and that played a big part in those losses. But the idea in Houston was you don't need a lot of talent around Deshaun Watson to be successful. He is that good, and you watched him do it this year. They still put up a ton of points. They were in every one of those games because of Deshaun Watson, and that's the other aspect. You can lack talent other places and have Deshaun Watson be your centerpiece, and he will make everybody around him better.
Well, while there's a chance that we will see a veteran under center for the 2021 season, there's an equal chance that we will see Drew Lock make his 19th career start when the season opens this fall. We'll discuss what this offseason means for Lock coming up after the break. Welcome back to Broncos Beat. Alexis Perry here, joined by James Palmer, Cecil, Lammey, and Benjamin Allbright. While the Broncos rumor mill is churning with veteran quarterback chatter, as of today, Drew Lock still is QB1. When the season wrapped up, everyone from John Elway to Vic Fangio expressed their confidence in Drew moving forward. But with a new GM in town, it really is up to George Paton to make that final decision. So if you were trying to persuade George Paton, what would be your case for why Drew Lock deserves another season as the starter?
I probably, Alexis, couldn't do as good of a job as Drew Lock's mom. She's very good at these things, but I'm going to give, this a shot here. I'm covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. I've been with them a lot this year. They have been under the microscope with the greatest quarterback of all time and a roster that is just littered with Pro Bowlers and a very talented offensive line. And all of us said, oh my God, it's not clicking. It's not working. What's happening? It's Tom Brady after 20 years in one system learning a new offense. Drew Lock has learned a new offense every year since the sophomore year of college. Give him an opportunity to have an entire offseason where he is with the same offensive coordinator, operating in the same offense, and now expanding on just learning all of it in terms of mastering it. If the greatest all time, Cecil, has to take some time to learn a new offense, why is everybody not thinking this is a very difficult thing for a quarterback, specifically a young one that has had to do it year in and year out?
Right, and we could talk about the physical attributes, but the physical attributes are easy to see. As Scott McLuhan always told me, like that stuff's it's a big arm. He's got a big arm. He's athletic, yeah, but he needs to be faster. Processor needs to be faster. He needs to understand things. He needs to understand concepts, and he does once in a while. There are times when he uses his eyes to manipulate the field. There are times when his footwork's actually good, but his footwork's still generally poor most of the time. And we're talking about generally considering one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL that's getting another shot. And to me, it comes down to fit. Drew Lock has skill. We all know that. That's easy to see. But does he fit with Pat Shurmur? And where is Shurmur in this conversation? Where is Shurmur to mold and craft his system to what Lock does best? You can have success. We've seen the success. Hell, we saw it with Rich Scangarello when he was a rookie, went 4-1 as a starter. Everybody's super excited. Where is that? Where is that coming together of the offensive coordinator with the quarterback with skill? Still needs work, still needs a lot of work. But that fit, I think, is
that wasn't persuasive at all, Cecil.
I think that's where we're getting off track. Is like what Locke and I could talk for 30 minutes about his footwork. I've talked to him for 3 years about his footwork. It's never been fixed. Okay, it's never been fixed. It's the fit with Pat Shurmur that needs to be fixed for Locke to succeed.
Well, I can tell you this offseason, he's working specifically with a footwork coach to try to get that stuff down, something he hasn't done in the past. But I think James hit on it at the beginning. Continuity. He hasn't had it except for one season in the SEC. And the minute he did, he went from 23 touchdowns to 44 overnight. He's Drew Lock. I don't want to bag on the kid, but he's a bit of a slow learner. But when he gets it, he gets it. And so you got to give him a little bit more time for these kinds of things. We saw down the stretch, the final 6 games of the season, he was markedly improved. So I think it's a combination of things. I think the OC and the quarterback need to get on the same page. I think the quarterback has got things he needs to improve on. But in the end, hey, he improved from year to year when he got a full season in college. Why not run it back and make George Paton look like a genius if it works out?
Well, you guys, if Paton does take your advice and he decides to bet on Drew here in the 2021 season, this offseason will be the most important one yet. You guys mentioned that he's working with a footwork coach. Like, what does a successful offseason look like for Drew Lock?
I think it's upstairs, Alexis. I think it's between the ears. And I think a lot of it, Cecil was right, that a lot of that mental side of things has to be part communication with Pat Shurmur. The two of them going back with a dialogue of what worked and what didn't work, what I like and what I didn't like. I know a lot of young quarterbacks sometimes are shy about saying, I don't want to run this. I want to run this. I don't think Drew is shy in saying that. I just want to know if Pat Shurmur's listening, and together they are developing that cohesiveness about what they want to run and what they want as the identity of this offense in year 2. Because first, with no offseason, he's just trying to learn everything Pat Shurmur's doing. There's no developing what works and what doesn't work. Now that you saw it on the field, everything upstairs, the decision-making, the speed of that, the communicating with his offensive coordinator and developing a better game plan about what he thinks works for him, I think the mental side of part of it is massive for Drew Lock.
Who am I to talk about somebody's wardrobe as my gaucho stylings are seen most every week right here on Broncos Beat, but I want him to get rid of the wristband.
Is that
James
velvet?
Highlights it. I'll put it in a kind of a simpler way, is like, just throw away the wristband. Because if you're throwing away the wristband, you know that you know everything. You know that offense like the back of your hand. So that's what a successful offseason would look like. You come in and he's got control, command of this offense. And as Benjamin mentioned, you go to 44 touchdowns last time that he had an OC 2 years in a row.
You know, I think the other part of this that gets lost that we forget about is as James mentioned, everybody's coming into this blind. You had rookies and Drew coming into this new offense blind. Justin Herbert in the same division came into an offense with veterans who already had experience in the system. So you had a bunch of pieces that were not on the same page for the Broncos. I think a successful offseason is everybody's on the same page and it's clicking on all cylinders by the time you get out of the preseason.
James, you mentioned the mental side of this. With all the chatter surrounding the quarterback position here in Denver, how challenging will this offseason be for Drew, just from a mental standpoint and having to listen to all of that?
Listen, I think they should have took the white gloves off this past offseason when they wanted him to come in knowing he was the guy. We're not going to have any sort of veteran backup. You're looking over your shoulder, and if you struggle the first couple of weeks, we may switch to him. I don't want them to do that again. I want them to have somebody come in and push him. And I want to see how mentally tough he is. Is there a more mentally difficult position in terms of toughness, what you have to learn, cognitive speed, all of it, than playing the quarterback position in all of sports? If he can't mentally handle a veteran coming in the offseason to push him, I think there's greater concerns. I'd like to see a veteran come in that can teach as well as compete with Drew Lock.
Well, coming up after the break, Ben and Cecil were down in Mobile, Alabama for the 2021 Senior Bowl. They'll share which guys caught their eye when we return. Thanks for joining us for this final segment of Broncos Beat. Guys, while James was busy covering the NFC Championship game last week, Cecil and Ben made their way down to Mobile, Alabama for the 2021 Senior Bowl to get a closer look at some of this year's best draft prospects. While we've discussed Drew Lock and the possibility of a veteran quarterback spicing things up this offseason, with the 9th overall pick, you guys, is there a quarterback in this year's draft class that you could see the Broncos trying to trade up for or even snagging at number 9?
Well, first I got to show off my Senior Bowl t-shirt as it's been 15 years. 15 years I've been going to that game, and
they give you one of those for 15 years?
No, you got to pay for it, but still, like
that was like a gold watch.
It's gotten so huge, and then this year because of the pandemic, it was a little bit smaller. But those of us that were there were able to see Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones, full disclosure, in my early rankings, I have him as a late first-round quarterback. But as we've seen with Carson Wentz, with Baker Mayfield, even with Josh Allen, guys go into that game and you think of them, borderline first rounder, and all of a sudden they catapult themselves into that top 10 selection. Now, Mac Jones, first round quarterback, right? Smart, accurate. And that's really where your quarterback evaluation should stop, because the physical tools in terms of athleticism aren't there with Mac Jones. He's not going to scramble and pick up yards with his feet, but he's very bright. He's very accurate, uncanny accuracy, as Benjamin can attest to as well. And he doesn't fit what Pat Shurmur wants to do. So again, to me, it's all about fit. Mac Jones could be the pick at 9. He'd be, that hyper accurate, super smart quarterback that could lead your franchise, but he doesn't fit what Pat Shurmur wants to do in terms of 3 vert. That's not his game. His game is more Sean Payton. His main game is more Josh McDaniels. So again, there's a quarterback at 9 that could be available that was at the Senior Bowl. His name's Mac Jones, but he doesn't fit what the Broncos have in place with Pat Shurmur.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody at that game at 9 that I would take. The opposite of Mac Jones at that game was probably Jamie Newman, a guy who had erratic accuracy, but all the tools in the world. And if you wanted somebody, maybe early day 3 is kind of a project guy, a guy who opted out due to COVID, Wake Forest guy who was going to go to Georgia, that's somebody I might look at as somebody with some upside who can execute what Shurmur wants to do there. That said, he's not going to threaten Drew Lock in season 1. So at that point, what's the point? If you're looking for a day 1 starter, if you're looking at 9 in the draft, you're probably looking at somebody who wasn't at the Senior Bowl, and much like James Palmer's hair there, the perfect landing spot would be right there at number 9 with Trey Lance. So again, but he's not a guy who's going to start day 1. So what are you doing?
I wasn't at the Senior Bowl, so I'll say something real quick. Alexis that wasn't at the Senior Bowl. My Buckeye Justin Fields, if he's sitting there at number 9. Take my boy Justin Fields, complete opposite individual from Dwayne Haskins, if you're making any sort of comparison between the two people. I love the way he plays. He has a lot of room to grow, but there is so much to love about Justin Fields if he's sitting at 9.
All right, guys. Well, last year the Broncos went with back-to-back wide receivers early. This year it feels like bolstering the defense will be the priority. If that's the case, who were some of the young defensive guys who stood out in Mobile?
Yeah, Keith Taylor, to me, was a player that stood out in that secondary. As I was focused on secondary linebackers, there's some Ohio State questions I have in your DMs, James. Make sure to check for those because there's 4 Buckeyes down there on the defensive side that were very good standout players, including Justin Hilliard, Jonathan Cooper on the defensive line. And I'll throw out some love for Kansas State Wildcat Wyatt Hubert as a pass rusher. I remember seeing Trey Hendrickson at the Shrine game years ago and thinking, that guy looks like Derek Wolfe. And he's turned into a Pro Bowl player. I looked at Hubert this year and thought, that guy looks like Trey Hendrickson. So keep an eye on him as well.
Richie Grant, the safety out of Central Florida. Kareem Jackson's getting, up there in the 30s. He's going to need a replacement soon. You got the Justin Simmons situation. You got to figure out. You need a safety. This guy likes to hit. He can intercept the ball. He's a great safety prospect in kind of the mold of Kareem Jackson. Honestly, I'd love to see the Broncos take him on day 2 if he's there. There were a couple of offensive linemen I thought really stood out, but let's be honest, the Broncos have almost got that shorn up. I don't think they need a Quinn Meinerz or Dylan Radich, so I think you pass on that. But Richie Grant, go get Richie Grant. Do it now.
Richie Grant, this year's Jeremy Chen, it sounds like.
A little bit different player, but I like him.
You like him?
I'll say, Alexis, I made 3 phone calls in preparation for this segment to people I knew down at the Senior Bowl. All 3 of them told me, Richie Grant. I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about Richie Grant. And then Benjamin goes crazy about him. So I guess we're talking to a lot of the right people because the way he can cover man-to-man, the way he can play deep, that is a guy with Kareem Jackson getting older that you should be looking at. It would be a great pair.
All right, Cecil, like you know, you can never have enough offensive weapons. So who were some of the high value sleepers that you can see the Broncos considering in those mid to late rounds?
High value sleepers, Khalil Herbert. You got to have help at the running back position. He's explosive. Almost every time there was a big play from the running back position, you'd look up and see, oh, there's Herbert. Well, once again, a guy that was supposed to be at the Shrine Game, goes to the Senior Bowl. You look at him as a day 3 pick, also can help out as a return man. So I'll always throw out some love for the Hokie running back.
Ben?
I don't think the Broncos going to be in the market for a receiver, but if you want one, Shi Smith was dominant out there. Eskridge is going to be gone by way too early when the Broncos won't be in the market for a receiver like that. But Shi Smith was somebody I really liked, and I think they could add him to a stacked receiving core.
James, final thoughts.
I'm looking at the running back spot because that's maybe the biggest question mark for the Denver Broncos moving forward in this season. Maybe Dimitri Felton, right, from UCLA. I like that versatility because that's becoming the new love in the NFL. A guy that can catch the football, do different things. Maybe a little Swiss Army knife later would be a nice addition to this group.
All right, guys, that is all the time we have for this week's edition of Broncos Beat, but we will see you guys same time, same place next Monday.